The aliens laughed at human hands. They called them soft, fragile, useless. That was 1 hour before their fortress went dark. The Zoxgith Dominion believed in strength above all things. Strength in bone, strength in armor, strength in gravity. Their homeworld crushed weak creatures before they could stand. Only the thickest bones survived. Only the strongest limbs endured. Over thousands of years, the Zoxgith evolved into towering giants of muscle and plated skin. Their arms were thick as tree trunks. Their legs, bent only slightly, built for power, not grace. Each hand ended in 3 heavy digits, tipped with blunt, cutting claws. They did not build tools for precision. They built tools for domination. Fortress Varnock hung in orbit above a quiet blue mining world. From space, it looked like a spearhead, carved from black stone. Inside, everything echoed with heavy footsteps and low mechanical hums. Metal floors shook when patrol units moved. Doors sealed with hydraulic force. Consoles responded to pressure, not touch. Humans were assigned to maintenance, because humans were small and weak. Mason Harley stood at a supply table inside Section C-19, sorting metal couplings with steady fingers. His jumpsuit was stained with grease and dust. A color ring circled his neck, glowing faint blue. All human laborers wore one. Across the room, 2 Zoxgith officers observed the work detail. One of them gave a low rumbling sound that passed for laughter. Observe their hands. It said through a translator drone hovering nearby. Thin, flexible, built for delicate tasks. They would not survive 1 season on our world. The second officer tilted its long armored head. Their wrists bend too freely. Structural weakness. Mason kept his eyes down. They rely on tools, the first continued. Remove tools, remove survival. The second let out another rumbling tone. Even their grip is fragile. I have seen one struggle to open a pressure hatch. Mason had opened that hatch. He had done it faster than any Zoxgith could. Because the release latch was small and required fingers, the officers moved on. Heavy steps echoing around Mason. The other humans worked silently. Shoulders lowered, faces tired. Some had stopped making eye contact days ago. Others stared at the floor like it might swallow them whole. The Zoxgith believed fear was natural in inferior species. Mason believed fear was data. He slid one coupling into a crate. His fingers brushed against something beneath the supply table. Thin axis seam. Barely visible. He kept working. When the guards turned the corner at the end of the corridor, Mason dropped to one knee as if adjusting his boot. His hand slipped. Under the table, he traced the seam. There, a Minton's micropanel. The opening was no wider than 2 fingers. 2. Small for a Zoxgith claw. 2. Precise for their thick digits to unlock. Mason's heart slowed. He pressed gently along the seam. Felt the catch. Twisted his wrist at just the right angle. Click. The panel shifted open. Inside was a narrow port connected to the fortress diagnostic grid. Manual interface only. He almost laughed. The strongest species in the quadrant had built a system they physically could not access without specialized tools, and they kept those tools locked because they never imagined needing them. Mason slid the panel shut as footsteps approached. The guards returned sooner than expected. One stopped beside him. It towered. Nearly 9 feet tall. Armor plates layered across its chest like black stone scales. You, it said through the translator. Why are you kneeling? Mason looked up calmly. Dropped a connector. The guard stared at his hands. Stand. Mason stood slowly. The guard reached toward the supply crate and tried to pick up a thin alignment rod. Its thick digits fumbled. The rod slipped once before it managed to grasp it awkwardly. The guard shoved it back into Mason's hands. Continue. They walked away. Mason returned to work, but his mind was racing. Manual interface. Diagnostic grid. If accessed correctly, it could reroute local power, or disable surveillance in a small sector, or open internal door locks. Not by force, by finesse. Across the room, he caught the eye of Lena Ortiz, former systems analyst. Captured during the fall of Nova Station, she saw something in his expression. Not fear, not surrender. Calculation. That night. In the human sleeping bay, Mason lay awake, staring at the metal ceiling. The Zoxkith announcement system echoed through the fortress. Labor efficiency remains suboptimal. Reclassification review in 48 cycles. Reclassification, everyone knew what that meant. Execution, recycling, .era, sure. Mason flexed. His fingers slowly in the dark. The aliens mocked these hands. They believed power meant strength alone. They believed rigidity meant superiority. They believed adaptability was weakness. Mason turned his wrist, remembering the feel of the hidden port clicking open. One small access point. One overlooked flaw. One species too arrogant to consider. Limitations in their own design. He whispered into the dark. They built everything for power. Beside him, Lena shifted. What? Mason's voice stayed low. They forgot about precision. Silence filled the room. Then Lena asked the only question that mattered. What are you thinking? Mason stared at his hands. I'm thinking, he said quietly. They've never had to defend themselves from something smaller. In the hallway outside, a patrol unit marched past. Heavy boots. Perfect rhythm. Inside the darkness, human. Fingers flexed, and somewhere deep within Fortress Varnock, a system waited to be touched. The aliens built their fortress for warriors. They never imagined someone would break it with fingertips. Fortress Varnock did not creak. It did not wobble. It did not fail. It was a monument to powered walls 3 meters thick. Doors that sealed with crushing force. Corridors wide enough for armored patrol units to march in perfect formation. The Zoxkith believed strength made mistakes impossible. Mason Halley believed strength only made mistakes harder to see. Morning cycle began with the same metallic tone that echoed through every chamber. Labor units too, assigned sectors. Humans moved in silent lines. Zoxkith patrols marched overhead on elevated walkways. Their heavy footfall sending vibrations through the metal floor. Mason kept his pace steady, inside. His thoughts moved fast. He needed access to that mic. Again, he needed time, and most importantly, he needed proof. At section C19, he resumed sorting couplings. Lena worked 2 stations away. Their eyes met only once. Mason waited until a patrol turned the far corner. He dropped a small metal ring. It rolled beneath the supply table. He crouched. Again, his hand slid under the seam. Twist click. The panel opened. Just enough. Inside. Thin data filaments glowed faint green. Manual diagnostic port? No. Alien claw could fit inside. Mason removed a tiny scrap of wire from his sleeve. He had taken it from a broken cleaning drone 3 days earlier. He slid the wire into the port. The fortress hummed. Differently, subtle, almost silent. A flicker passed through the lights overhead. Across the room, one of the ceiling cameras twitched. For half a second. Before stabilizing, Mason pulled the wire out immediately and sealed the panel. He stood just as a shadow fell over him. Zoxkith guard watched him. Its head tilted. "You are sweating." Mason shrugged slightly. "It is warm." In this sector. The guard stared. Another moment. Then it turned away. Mason resumed sorting parts. But inside, he felt its confirmation. The manual override worked one wire. One touch, he could interfere with local systems, not permanently, but enough. Later that cycle, humans gathered in the maintenance corridor during rest rotation. They were allowed 7 minutes. 7. Mason spoke without looking at them. "They reclassify in 48 cycles," he said quietly. A few heads lifted. "They recycle us," someone whispered. Mason shook his head. "Not if the fortress fails." Inspection. Silence. Lena stepped closer. "What are you planning?" Mason's fingers moved as he talked, picking up a bolt, turning it. "They built this place for large bodies, heavy tools, impact repairs." He looked at his own hands. "They didn't design it for fine motor failure." A mechanic named Aaron frowned. "What does that even mean?" "It means," Mason said, "if enough small systems malfunction at once, they won't know where to strike." "They'll send engineers," Lena replied. "Engineers with claws." Mason said softly. That made a few people look up. He continued. "Cooling regulators require micro-calibration. Sensor relays rely on fiber alignment. Shield harmonics depend on delicate contact points." He flexed his fingers again. "We can reach places they physically can't." The group stared at him, fear and something else mixing in there. AI's hope was dangerous, but so was doing nothing. A loud echo interrupted them. "Return to workstations." The Zoxkith officer watched from above that evening. Mason began. He slipped into a maintenance shaft during garbage transfer rotation. Humans were allowed inside to clear debris. The shaft narrowed quickly. Too narrowed for a Zoxkith to follow. Mason crawled on hands and knees. Metal scraped softly against fabric. He reached the coolant. Alignment hub. 4 tiny screws secured the cover plate. Alien tools were large, impact-driven. But Mason used a broken shard of metal, turning each screw slowly. He didn't remove them. He loosened them. Barely, just enough to misalign. The pressure flow. He resealed the plate and crawled back. 2 hours later, the temperature in Sector D rose by 2 degrees. Not enough for alarm, enough for discomfort. The next day, he misaligned a sensor array by 0.5 millimeter. It caused a delay in response time. Again. No alarm. But the fortress logs recorded anomalies. The Zoxkith began filing maintenance reports. General Korthax received them personally. Inside the command chamber, the massive aliens studied the data. Cooling irregularities. Sensor misreads pressure. Flux variations. He growled. "This fortress does not malfunction." An officer bowed slightly. "Perhaps construction flaws?" Korthax's eyes narrowed. "Impossible." Back in Section C-19, the lights flickered again. This time, longer. Humans looked up. Zoxkith patrols paused. Mason kept working. Inside, satisfaction burned quietly. By the end of the second cycle, small failures spread across 5 sectors. Nothing catastrophic yet. But patterns formed. Ordered a full system diagnostic. Engineers attempted recalibration. Their thick claws struggled with micro-connectors. Tools slipped. Adjustments were imprecise. Repairs took longer. Frustration built in the sleeping bay that night. Lena sat beside Basita. "Mason, they're noticing," she whispered. "They think it's equipment decay," Mason replied. "For now." She hesitated. "What happens when they don't?" Mason's eyes hardened. "Then we stop being quiet." At that moment, an announcement echoed through the fortress. Human labor efficiency remains unacceptable. Reclassification cycle. Reduced execution in 36 cycles. The room fell silent. Time just shortened. Lena swallowed. 30 seconds. Mason nodded slowly. "Then we accelerate." The next cycle, he returned to the micropanel, this time. He stayed longer. He didn't just loosen something, he rewired a relay carefully. Precisely when he closed the panel and stepped to Fortress, trembled. Not violently. Just enough. Somewhere deep inside Varnak, a power distributor started. Emergency lighting flickered red for 3 seconds. Alarms began to hum faintly in distant corridors. Zoxkith patrol units shifted uneasily. For the first time since the humans were captured, the fortress felt uncertain. Mason stood quietly at his station, hands steady, breathing calm. Above him, General Korthax stared at the system diagnostics. His deep voice filled the chamber. "Find the flaw." Below him, in the narrow shadows between machines, Mason flexed his fingers. Once more, they called human hands weak. They were about to learn what weakness could do. The first explosion was not loud, it was wrong. A deep, grinding vibration rolled through Fortress. Varnak, like something inside it, had slipped out of alignment. Lights flickered. Metal groaned. Somewhere deep in the structure, a coolant valve snapped. Open to fast. Steam burst through a pressure seam. Zaxkith. Patrols froze mid-stride. General Korthax rose from his command platform. "Report." His officers scrambled. Sector D, temperature spike. Sensor relay delay, in Sector F pressure imbalance, in structural spine. Korthax's jaw tightened. "These systems are independent. They are now connected," one officer said carefully. Below, in section C19. Mason felt it. The relay he rewired was doing more than he expected. The systems were compensating for one another. And in compensating, they were destabilizing. Lena moved closer without looking at him. "Is this part of your plan?" Mason kept stacking couplings. "Yes. Was it supposed to happen this fast?" "A beat?" "No." A loud alarm cut through the sector. Not the normal labor alert, this one was sharp. Urgent. Red. Emergency strips lit along the ceiling. Overhead, a Zoxkith patrol leapt from the walkway to the floor. Their heavy landings cracked tile. Labor units remained stationary. The guards split up. One of them moved toward the maintenance corridor, toward the micropanel area. Mason's pulse slowed. Instead of rising, he wiped sweat from his brow and stepped forward deliberately. "Permission to retrieve dropped coupling." The guard looked down at him. "Suspicious. You will remain where you stand." The guard moved toward the corridor. Mason's mind calculated fast. If they found the panel open, it would be over. The guard reached the seam. It crouched awkwardly. Its rigid spine remained straight. It extended one long claw, trying to grip the edge. Its claw slipped. It tried again. The angle was wrong. The access seam was too low. Too narrow. The alien growled softly. Another tremor shook the fortress. Steam hissed. From somewhere close, the guard stood back upright, We will send engineers. They turned and leaped toward the upper level. Mason exhaled slowly. Lena whispered, "You're buying time." He nodded once. That cycle, the fortress became chaotic. Power rerouted automatically. Backup generators activated in sectors not designed for full load. Doors hesitated when sealing. Elevators paused. Mid-level.xal single quotes KETH patrols grew restless. They relied on rhythm, on perfect timing. Now their cadence broke in the command chamber. Korthax slammed his palm into a console. This is sabotage. His officers shifted. From who? The silence was heavy. Korthax looked down through a central observation shaft toward the labor floors. The flawed ones, he said slowly. They are small, flexible, everywhere. Back in the sleeping bay, humans gathered closer than usual. Fear spread, so did something else. Excitement. ARUN spoke quietly. They don't know how to fix it. No, Mason replied. They know how to smash it. Then what's the next move? Lena asked. Mason leaned against the wall. The central harmonic core. Every Zoxkith fortress ran on resonance control. Varnik's core stabilized internal structure and power flow. If it destabilized, the entire fortress would shake itself apart. Arun blinked. That's suicide. Not if we time it. How do we reach it? Someone whispered. Mason's eyes lifted toward the ceiling. They can't crawl. Later that night, during waste disposal shift, Mason slipped back into the maintenance shaft. This time, he didn't go alone. Lena followed. They crawled through narrow ducts barely wide enough for their shoulders. Below them, massive alien patrols stomped. Above them, cables hummed. They reached a vertical access shaft. A straight drop of 20 meters. At the bottom, a heavy sealed door led to the harmonic core. No Zoxkith used this shaft. It was too tight, too vertical, no room for their rigid bodies to descend. Mason wrapped fabric strips around a cable. Improvised grip. He looked at Lena. Still want to go home? She nodded once. Let's break their perfect toy. They descended slowly, carefully, their knees bent deep, with each controlled drop, feet absorbing weight, hands gripping narrow edges at the bottom. They crouched before the sealed access door, no keycard slot. Just a manual latch, hidden behind a reset. Plight? Mason slid his fingers into the recess. Twisted. The latch clicked open, the door hissed slightly. Inside, the harmonic core glowed blue. A massive cylindrical column. Filled with oscillating light, it vibrated at a steady frequency. Too steady. Mason approached the outer control housing. Tiny calibration dials lined the panel. Designed for fine adjustments, but likely never touched manual. He pulled a thin metal strip from his sleeve. Once we start, Lena whispered, there's no going back. Mason nodded. He loosened one dial by less than a degree. The vibration shifted barely. He adjusted another, then a third. The frequency began to wobble. Above them, somewhere in the fortress, a support column cracked. Patrol units stumbled mid-stride. Command consoles flickered. In the command chamber, Korthax steadied himself as the floor shook harder. What have they done? An officer hissed. Korthax's eyes burned. Sealed the labor sectors. Below, the harmonic core's vibration deepened. The entire structure groaned. Mason stepped back. That's enough. They climbed fast, hands moving, knees bending, bodies flowing upward in narrow spaces. The aliens could not follow. Behind them, the harmonic core stuttered, then roared. Emergency lights went fully red. Automatic lockdown procedures triggered. Doors sealed, but not all of them. Some locks misaligned from earlier sabotage. Some relays failed to engage. On the labor floors, humans felt the tremors. Some fell, some steadied themselves. Rock dust fell from ceilings. Arun looked toward the corridor. This is it. Mason and Lena burst from the duct, sliding across the floor. Mason shouted, louder than he ever had inside Varnak. Move! The humans didn't hesitate this time. They ran. Guards attempted formation, but their leaps were off. Timed their landings unstable. The polished floors vibrated unevenly. One guard slipped, another slammed into a wall. When a support beam shifted, the fortress was losing rhythm, and the Zokskith needed rhythm. Above, Korthax roared orders: stabilize the core, reinforce the lower structure. But his engineers struggled to access the calibration ports. Too small, too recessed, claws too thick. The fortress trembled again. A louder crack split the ceiling of Section C-19. Mason grabbed Lena's hand and pulled her toward the loading hangar. If the harmonic core overloaded completely, Varnak would collapse. They needed out as humans poured into the lower corridors. Korthax stood in the shaking command chamber. His perfect fortress vibrated like a wounded animal. He finally understood. This was not brute force. This was not assault. This was something worse. The Flawed ones had found the seam, and they had bent it. The harmonic core flickered blue, then orange. The entire fortress shuddered violently. Mason reached the loading bay doors. The outer cliff face loomed beyond. Wind howled behind him. The structure screamed. Lena looked at him, breathless. What did you just do? Mason's eyes burned with determination. I taught perfection how to fall. The harmonic core began to overload. The harmonic core did not explode. It staggered. That was worse. The vibration deepened into a violent tremor that rippled through Fortress Varnak. Like a living thing in pain, support beams screamed. Stone cracked. Metal plates shifted half a centimeter out of alignment. For a Zokskith structure built on perfect symmetry, half a centimeter was chaos. In the loading bay, Mason steadied himself against a cargo crate. Humans slipped, fell, recovered. Their knees bent, absorbed. Zok. Adjusted. The Zokskith guards did not adapt. So Izali. Two of them leaped down from an upper platform. They expected a clean landing instead. The floor jolted at the last second. Their rigid legs struck at a slight angle. One knee actuator shrieked. The guard stumbled forward. The second collided into him. Both crashed hard. The humans saw it, and something changed in their eyes. They're slipping. Arun whispered. They're not gods. Lena replied. Another violent tremor rocked the chamber. The massive loading doors flickered between open and sealed states. Beyond them, the cliff face dropped into night fog. No transport ships, no rescue, just raw stone and open air. Mason looked up at the overhead crane. System. Heavy steel hooks hung from reinforced cables. A thought formed fast. We climb. Arun blinked. Climb where? Mason pointed upward. There. Above the loading bay, maintenance gantries lined the interior wall. From there, external service ladders ran down the cliff face. Emergency maintenance routes. Built for engineers, too narrow for XL single quotes Katha. Behind them, General Korthax stormed into the hangar. His arrival felt like an impact. The giant alien commander landed with crushing force. The floor cracked. Beneath him, even unbalanced, he radiated power. Contain them, he roared. Guards tried. But tremors disrupted their coordination. The harmonic core pulsed unevenly. Dot lights strobed red. A guard charged toward Mason. Mason didn't run. He ducked low and slid across the shaking floor. The guard tried to pivot mid-stride. Its spine remained rigid. Its leg locked for a microsecond. Too long. The tremor hit. Its center of gravity shifted. It fell sideways. The fall shook the entire hangar. Humans swarmed around it. Not with weapons. With movement, they ran in every direction. Up crates, under machinery, across unstable terrain. The Zoxkith tried to predict patterns. But humans had none. They were fluid. Unpredictable. Messy, and that chaos was strength. Mason grabbed one of the crane cables. Zira. He shouted. She was already moving. The former logistics officer understood instantly. She began tying fabric strips and torn wiring into makeshift climbing harnesses. Form lines, she ordered. 3 per cable. Keep moving. The harmonic core pulsed again. A deeper vibration this time. Somewhere below support. Column fractured. The fortress groaned like a dying beast. In the command chamber, far above, technicians screamed in panic. Core instability at 80%. Feedback? Loops are amplifying. Korthax's second-in-command spoke cautiously. Shall we initiate emergency evacuation protocol? Korthax's eyes burned with fury. We do not evacuate. The floor shook harder. Even he staggered half a step. He steadied himself. For the first time, the idea entered his mind. What if perfection could break? Back in the hangar, humans began climbing, hands gripping cables, feet bracing against walls, knees bending deep for leverage. They ascended like insects. No, like something older. Something evolved to move in any direction. A guard fired a sonic blast. The beam shattered a crate instead of hitting its target. The human it aimed at had already swung sideways. Fluid, adaptive, alive. Mason climbed last. He looked down once. Korthax stood below, watching, learning the alien commander. Launched upward, a vertical leap aimed to intercept Mason mid-dash. Climb. Mason saw it calculated. Fast, he let go. For a split second, he fell 20 meters of empty air. The Zoxkith expected panic instead. Mason bent to midfull, knees compressing, body rotating. He hit a lower cargo platform. Rolled, absorbed impact. Sprang up again. The alien landed where Mason had been seconds before. Its legs struck at full extension. The tremor hit at the same time. The floor shifted. The alien's actuator screamed. It stumbled. And this time, it did not recover perfectly. The idea spread like wildfire among the humans watching. They fall. They are not unbreakable. Above, Lena reached the upper gantry. She pulled 2 others up. Rocky helped the younger captive who froze halfway. Bend your knees, he told him. Trust them. The young man nodded, moved, climbed. The harmonic core surged orange. Warning sirens wailed in alien-ly resonance. A deep crack split the hangar wall. Dust rained down. Metal. Beams twisted slightly out of alignment. Mason reached the top. He looked down. At Korthax, one last time, the alien commander stared back. Fury, disbelief, and something new. Understanding, you cannot win. Korthax roared. Mason wiped blood from his lip. We don't win by standing still. He leapt through the upper service hatch. Humans poured out onto the exterior. Maintenance scaffold. Wind slammed against them. The cliff dropped 50 meters to jagged rock below zero. Secured cables along the scaffold. Slide down in controlled drops. She ordered. No jumping. Behind them, Varnock trembled violently. Inside. Engineers scrambled. 2, slowed. 2, rigid. 2, dependent on flawless systems. The harmonic core surged to 90% instability. Korthax limped toward the exit. His leg actuator was damaged. Not destroyed, but weakened. He felt it. The flaw, the crack in his perfect form. He stopped at the edge of the hangar, watched the humans descending like a living waterfall. He could not follow the ep. Scaffold was too narrow, the cables too thin, his body too rigid. The harmonic core reached critical threshold. The fortress spine split. A massive internal shockwave rolled through. Varna K. Glass shattered. Internal bridges collapsed. The loading bay roof caved inward. The once perfect architecture began to devour itself. Outside, Mason reached the bottom of the cliff. One by one, humans dropped beside him, bruised, bleeding, alive. Above them, Fortress Varnock groaned, then partially collapsed inward. A section of its outer wall fractured and slid down the cliff face in a thunder of stone and metal. The harmonic core did not detonate. It destabilized the fortress. Survived, but crippled. Its perfect symmetry ruined. Its internal systems damaged beyond quick repair. Mason stared up at the broken monolith. It bent. Lena whispered. No, Mason corrected quietly. It learnt. Behind them, distant Zoxkith reinforcements were already mobilizing. Searchlights scanned the lower canyon. Humans had minutes at most. Zira looked at Mason. What now? Mason looked toward the dark valley beyond. There's a transport depot? 6 kilometers east. Arun frowned. That's Zoxkith territory. Mason nodded. Not for long. Above, in the shattered remains of his command chamber, Korthax stood amidst falling debris. He stared at the broken harmonic core readings. His fortress still stood, but it was no longer perfect. He clenched his fists slowly. The flawed ones had not overpowered him. They had out-adapted him. And he hated that realization more than defeat below. Mason gathered the survivors. The fortress burned behind them. Search patrols closed in. The real escape had not even begun. And now, the Dominion would hunt them personally. The fortress did not fall. It survived. That was the problem. As Mason led the survivors through the dark canyon, searchlights cut across the sky behind them. Varna K was damaged, not destroyed. And the Zoxkith did not forgive humiliation. They'll deploy hunters, Lena said quietly, as they moved over broken rock. They already have, Mason replied. Far above. Transport craft detached from the fortress. Structure, sleek, fast, designed for pursuit. The Dominion would not let 50 escaped humans simply disappear. Zira counted heads while walking. 48, she said. 5, injured, but mobile. Too slow. Mason nodded. We adjust for the slow. The canyon floor was uneven. Sharp stone. Loose gravel. Perfect terrain for flexible legs. Behind them, the first hunter unit landed at the cliff base. The heavy impact echoed through the canyon. They moved in coordinated leaps, covering distance. Quickly. Too quickly. They're gaining, Arun said. Mason studied the canyon walls. Narrow ridges. Sharp inclines. Tight spaces between stone formations. Spread out, he ordered. Break pattern. The group split into smaller clusters, 3 or 4 at a time. Moving unpredictably. The hunters paused. Their formation relied on rhythm. On synchronized. Advanced. But now. The targets were scattered, chaotic human. One hunter leapt forward, landed on loose gravel. Its rigid leg slid. It caught itself, but the delay cost seconds. Seconds mattered. Mason reached a steep incline. Too steep for a Zoxgith to climb cleanly up, he said. They scrambled. Hands gripping rock, knees bending deep, bodies hugging the stone. One injured man slipped. Rocky grabbed him mid-fill bend. Rocky said through clenched teeth, "Trust your legs." Below, a hunter attempted the same climb. Its long legs extended fully. It tried to push upward with force. The angle shifted slightly. It lacked the flexibility to adjust. Would lost purchase. The alien dropped heavily. Frustration hummed from its chests. They were built for explosive perfection, not messy terrain. Above. Mason reached a ridge. He looked back. Hunters were spreading. Trying to predict escape vectors. He spotted something ahead. An abandoned extraction rail. A deep industrial trench with a narrow overhead maintenance beam. An idea formed through their... He said. The humans slid into the trench. The beam overhead was barely shoulder dash width. Mason grabbed it and swung across the gap. One by one. Others followed. Hands, feet balance fluid motion. When the hunters arrived, they stopped. The trench was too narrow for them. To descend properly, the overhead beam was too thin for their mass. One attempted to balance. It's rigid. Posture made micro-adjustments. Impossible. It slipped off the beam and crashed into the trench wall. Rock cracked. The alien roared in fury from above. Mason saw something new. Hesitation. The hunters were adapting slower. Their design favored power, not improvisation. They finally chose to leap across the trench. One cleared it, another clipped the edge mid-air. Its rigid leg twisted slightly on landing it. Staggered, humans kept moving. 6 kilometers. Felt endless. Searchcraft roared overhead. Scanning lights swept the canyon floor. Mason saw the transport. Depot ahead, an automated cargo platform carved into rock. If they reached it, they might live. If they failed, there would be no second chance. Behind them, the hunters regrouped. More had arrived. Korthax himself stood. Among them, his damaged leg reinforced with temporary plating. His movements slightly altered. But still.
Powerful.
He studied the terrain, watched the humans flow across stone like water. He felt something he refused to name, fear of unpredictability. Mason reached the depot entrance. A sealed cargo gate. Manual override panel. 2. High for a direct reach. He jumped. Caught the lower frame. Pulled himself up. Bent knees against the metal. Surface. Reaching the control, he forced the panel open. Inside. Primitive circuitry. Designed for maintenance. Workers. He rewired it in seconds. The gate groaned. Slowly opening. Humans poured inside. Arun dragged the last. Injured man through. Mason stayed outside. Watching Korthax approached within 20 meters. There, eyes met. No words this time. Just understanding. The gate opened fully. Mason stepped backward inside, hit the emergency closure. The massive metal door slammed shut. The hunters struck it from outside. The entire structure shook, but the depot was reinforced. 4 heavy cargo. Inside. Humans collapsed against walls, breathing hard, alive. 4. Now. Mason looked at the control console. Power was minimal. But one system still functioned, an automated freight transport rail. If activated, would carry them away from the canyon. Away from Varnake. Away from the hunt. He began rewiring again. Outside, Korthax stood before the sealed gate. His leg actuator hissed softly. He pressed one claw against the cold metal. Inside the depot, the flawed ones prepared to move again. And the war had only just begun. The freight rail shuddered to life. Dust fell from the depot ceiling. Old motors groaned as energy flowed through systems that had not moved in years. Inside the sealed cargo bay, 50 exhausted humans stood in silence. Mason's hands flew across the control panel. Manual override accepted. The screen flashed an alien script. The transport platform beneath their feet, VIBRATED. It would carry them 3 kilometers underground before surfacing near supply corridor. If it worked, if the power held, if the Zoxkith didn't tear the depot apart first. Outside, something massive slammed into the gate. Metal bent inward slightly. Korthax's voice thundered through the outer hull. You cannot run forever. Mason didn't answer. He just flipped the final switch. The rail platform lurched. Forward. Slow at first, then faster. The grinding of metal against metal echoed through the narrow tunnel. Outside, Korthax felt the vibration shift. They moved beneath us, one hunter said. Korthax's damaged leg adjusted with a slight hiss. Collapse the rail. Engineers scrambled to trigger emergency blockades. But Varnak's damaged core still struggled. Power fluctuations rippled through the lower grid. Doors failed to seal. Control systems lagged. Perfection had cracked underground. The transport raced. Through darkness, humans clung to support bars. The air smelled like oil and old steel. Rocky looked at Mason. Are we safe? Mason shook his head. No. The tunnel shook violently. Somewhere behind them, a partial collapse triggered by Korthax's command blocked part of the track. The platform hit debris at high speed. Sparks exploded. The railcar jolted. Sideways, Lena. Fel Mason grabbed her arm before she slammed into the wall. The transport skidded, tilted. Almost flipped, but the flexible suspension system built for variable terrain absorbed the shock. The rail corrected. Humans adjusted their stance. Instinctively, knees bending, weight shifting, bodies adapting mid-movement. If the Zoxkith had been aboard, their rigid frames would have snapped bones. Instead, humans stayed standing. The platform burst from the tunnel into open night air. A small supply clearing lay ahead. Dark. Empty. For the moment. Off. Mason shouted. They spilled from the railcar, running toward scattered rock formations for cover. Seconds later, searchcraft roared overhead. Scanning lights burned across the clearing. But the humans were already moving. Low. Fluid. Unpredictable. Korthax arrived at the depot surface minutes later. He saw the tunnel exit. The destroyed track. The open valley. His damaged leg protested when he stepped forward. He ignored it. They survive, one hunter said quietly. Korthax stared at the distant human silhouettes disappearing into the terrain. They adapt, he corrected. He flexed his injured joint. It responded, but imperfectly. For the first time in his life, he felt instability. Within himself, his body had been engineered for dominance. Now, it carried a flaw. And that flaw had come from a bent blade, from a flexible knee, from something he had called weak. Far across the valley, Mason slowed his pace. The Enclave beacon pulsed faintly on his wrist device. Home. If they reached it, the freed workers would not just survive, they would fight. And with the data they had stolen from Varnak, they could strike where the Dominion never expected. Rocky jogged beside him. They'll chase us, he said. Double quotes. Yes. They'll adapt. Yes. Rocky. Pangaea, can we win? Mason looked back once at the distant fortress silhouette on the horizon. Damaged. Cracked. No. Longer flawless. We already did. Behind him, the 77th Engineering Battalion moved with new purpose. They were not broken laborers anymore. They were survivors, soldiers, proof. That flexibility beat force. Proof that unpredictability beat precision. Proof that humanity's flaw was its greatest weapon. Above, dawn began to rise. The sky shifted from black to deep blue.
Wathax
watched it from the canyon ridge. His fortress stood behind him. Scarred. He understood now. The Dominion had prepared for armies, for fleets, for direct assault. They had not prepared for adaptation, for crawling through vents, for bending under pressure, for sliding beneath a god and cutting him down at the joint. Turned to his hunters. This war changes. How, Commander? He looked toward the fading human figures. We must learn to bend. Far away, Mason reached the mountain entrance of the human enclave. The gates opened. Cheers echoed from inside. The 77th had returned, and with them a story, a legend, a lesson. Perfection breaks. Humanity bends, and bending wins.